podcast. After my full-time job got in the way last week, I am back this week, so you don't have to hear James Grande complain about me and these vacations. That was not the case this most recent time. Other times it's probably fair criticism, but this time not fair, not valid, not rooted. So James has not officially apologized, but I am putting it out in the ethos that I, in advance, will accept said apology from the _real_grande. But I'm on Twitter at Colby R. Conway, and I'm back in the saddle here with the Selz man, Matt Selz, at the Selz man on Twitter. Matt, it's been about a week. How are things going for you, my friend?
Things are good. Do we have to refer to it as X now? Right? Isn't that the thing? I don't know. Elon has another crazy
you're
idea.
right. Yeah. Follow Matt on X at the Selz man, and you can read his X's and
That
the
doesn't sound
X's
dirty at all, right?
and the X's that you like.
Yes.
Or bookmark, I guess. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. This is a very odd conversation to have. I'm good. Another week in the books. It's been an interesting week for baseball. Like, I feel like the AL standings have flipped about 4 times in the last 6 days. My Nats pulled off a sweep for the first time in 2 years. They swept the Giants, so that's feeling pretty. And they lit up. Who was it? Logan Webb. They lit up for like 10 runs. So feeling pretty decent about that.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, how can you not? How can you not?
I like it, and the guys we got for San Diego are just continuing to show that that's a very lopsided trade.
I think I am in agreement with you. I know CJ Abrams is a guy I put in the Streaks and Trends article, so I'm glad to see he's doing well.
Trey Turner this year.
Stop it. Stop it. You're not wrong, but stop it. I don't want to hear it. Can't hear it. Can't hear it. But
I'm not wrong though.
No, I'm not disagreeing with you. I said that. I hear you. We just, we don't talk about that.
Yeah, Trey Turner, if you're listening, I want my $20 auction back, please.
There you go. Well, let's talk
by the
about
way, that's
this.
in a $100 budget, so in a 260 league, that's equivalent to like $45.
Yeah,
or $60 or whatever it is.
For sure. And Matt, a couple things. Obviously, the MLB trade deadline is right around the corner, so we're going to talk to that with a fun little segment here. Just want to get your insight on a couple of things. But first, we got to talk about a young Milwaukee outfielder who got the call. Sal Frelick gets the call, comes up, if I'm not mistaken, 3 hits in his debut, if I remember correctly. And now, I mean, he's a bat that can make contact, so that should surely help this Milwaukee lineup that seems to struggle to do that at times. So what do you think the rest of the way for Frelick? Just how valuable can he be for fantasy managers here in the second half?
I think he can be pretty decently valuable. He's going to get some decent playing time. Outfield is a position that's thinned out, whether it be from injuries or from dudes just not showing up and playing well. He's been, it was a little bit of, pick your poison with the Brewers outfield prospects. We've seen, Garrett Mitchell come up. We've seen, another guy come up. Now we got Sal Frelick. You still got Jackson Chourio, who's the best one of the bunch. But Frelick, to me, is kind of an under-the-radar ad. He's going to be a high-contact guy. He walks a pretty decent amount. He's got decent pop and decent speed, but it's not going to we're not talking an easy 2020 guy, right? When they drafted him, the comp was, or the idea was he was a baseball player. He's going to do a little bit of everything and not hurt you, right? But down the stretch here, we could use a high average guy who's got a decent amount of pop and, a little bit of speed for sure. I don't see why we wouldn't be looking for him. Now, we're only swapping him out for a bench guy, right? You're not going to take a starting outfielder for you and swap him. If you need bench depth, swap out a bench guy who's not getting a whole lot of at-bats and add Sal Frelick.
Yep. And then when you look at I'm looking at your updated prospect report and rankings over at fantasyalarm.com, which if you haven't checked that out, you should. And post-draft, you had him coming in at number 44 overall, second in the Brewers system, and just inside the top 20 overall of outfielders. So to say the least, you're relatively high on the youngster in the outfield.
Yeah, he's gonna do a little bit of everything for you for fantasy. He's not gonna light the stat line up. We're not talking about, a 30-30 guy or a 25-25 guy. Over the course of a full season, he may get to 20-20, but it's going to be like the most bulldogish 2020 you've ever seen. It's not going to be any. It's not going to be like a Kyle Tucker easy 2020 or But I have no problems adding Sal Frelick.
And now, of course, let's talk about the MLB trade deadline, just like we're going to each episode leading up to the deadline and probably a day or two after the deadline as well. So, WWMD, what would Matt Selz do? I left the S out. It's easier. So, what would Matt Selz do? So, Matt, a couple teams here. Want to just get your insight here leading up to the deadline, a couple of noteworthy teams and maybe some precarious or interesting spots. So, let's start with this. If you were the GM of these teams or just involved in baseball operations, however you want to word it, would you be buying or selling for these couple of teams? So let's start with the Angels. 4 games back out of the wild card. They have won 6 of their last 10. Everything right now surrounding the Angels is around, will they trade Ohtani? Will they trade Ohtani? But what if you flip the coin and say, is this a chance? I don't think they can afford Ohtani anyway, but let's try to buy at the deadline here to show an investment into the team's success long term and maybe an attempt to keep Ohtani. So let's say this. If you were the GM, would you be buying or selling? And then what do you actually think happens with the Angels?
If I'm the Angels, I sell. Like, you've had, 6 years now with Trout and Ohtani together and another 4 with Rendon added to that. And there's been some other guys in that span. Like, I think an aging Pujols was still there. You had, a few other not earth-shaking guys, but, decent players, and it hasn't worked. I don't think there's any way they have the money to re-sign Shohei Ohtani. He's going to command at least 10 years, $600 million. That's what we've seen reported from several anonymous GMs, from national baseball writers. I don't think you can have $400 million tied up in Mike Trout and $600 million tied up in Shohei, and then another $38 million a year for a shin-bruised Rendon who clearly doesn't care anymore, just wants to go to the beach and cash in his checks. Like, that's not the way to build a team. Their farm system is terrible. That's not just my rankings, by the way. A lot of consistent rankings put them in the bottom 5 of Major League Baseball, so they need an influx of talent. That also means they likely can't trade for anybody because you usually have to give up prospects to get people, and they don't really have any. Even their first round pick this year was like you drafted Pavin Smith. Like, that guy hasn't done anything. So I think as hard as it is to do, I think they're going to trade Shohei Ohtani. I think they'll get about 5 prospects for him because the team that trades for him gets a 2-month head start on negotiating solely with him to sign him long term.
Yep, I am in agreement with you there as well. We head over to the National League with the New York Mets spending oodles and bundles of millions and billions and trillions of dollars for this team just to be 7 games under 500 here coming up on their 100th game of the season. Only 4-6 in their last 10. A lot of talent, a lot of money invested into that team. Really, it's going to be, can they turn it around on the backs of their aging pitchers? Do they potentially deal said aging pitchers? So what do you think is going to happen with the Mets? Do you think they end up buying at the deadline and trying to pay their way out of the struggles that they've had currently? Or is this going to be a sell and then they're just going to look to 2024?
It's a very interesting situation, right? Because at one point you have Steve Cohen, who clearly has no problem sinking money into lost causes, including 42-year-old starting pitchers. On the other hand, his GM, Billy Epler, is one who sank Anaheim for like a decade and then somehow got a job with a fully loaded Steve Cohen. So, I don't know. They have prospects that they can deal. We've talked about it before, right? They could trade Mark Vientos. They could trade Ronnie Mauricio. They could trade Kevin Parada if they wanted to, because Francisco Alvarez seems like he's the real deal, and go get some help, mainly in the pitching department or wherever the heck you think you need help. So I think ultimately, they make some moves. I'm not sure it's going to work, but I do think they're kind of buyers at the deadline.
Yeah, they're an interesting one. They're a really interesting one. They kind of seem like that team where, I mean, I'm going to simplify it pretty extravagantly here, but it almost seems like, they have a used car that needs a new engine, new transmission, new everything. And it's like, well, hey, buying a new car would be about 20 grand, but fixing it would be 15 grand. Let's just throw the 15 grand in and try to right this ship and keep what we have. But the only thing is, like, I'm looking at your prospect rankings, and they're not a loaded system. They have some top end talent,
Yes,
but depth
they're not
wise is an
terribly
issue.
deep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's an like, do you just sink the season and tell Mets fans, hey, we'll regroup because I also don't know where they go for 2024, to be honest, because the contracts they signed this offseason are longer term ones, right? Like you've got Nimmo for like another 3 years. You've got, at least another year of Scherzer, I'm pretty sure. You've got another year, maybe 2 of Verlander, depending on options. So like, and Lindor's there for like another decade. So, I'm not entirely sure where they go. They're not letting Pete Alonso go anytime soon. They're going to sign him. So it's just a weird situation because they got a lot of money tied up in what's not been fruitful signings.
And then right across town, you got the Yankees, 6 games over 500 right now. And obviously that
What's
AL
a
East,
miracle?
yeah. And that AL East can flip upside down in the matter of days, really. Aaron Judge took live BP, so he's in that next step of his coming back. The pitching is a problem. It's going to be a problem. It feels
It's
like at this
been a
point it's
problem.
forever a problem.
Yeah.
That's an evergreen X. Am I right? Just say that it's the Yankees and pitching.
It's been a problem since Brian Cashman became GM in 1996.
Yeah, because I can't say tweet, so it's an X. It's a new
Yeah.
evergreen X that we could just do every single year. Yankees need pitching help in July. Do it again next year. We'll do it again the next year. We'll do it again the next year. It is an evergreen X at this point. But for this year, at the deadline, what do the Yankees do? Because I don't think one pitcher solves this. Like this is not a good team at all.
No, it's a highly flawed team. It's Garrett Cole and 17 question marks on the pitching staff. And we've seen that. How many different starters have they rolled out this year and then sent back to AAA and then called them back up? And then, somebody gets injured and then they call somebody. Like, we've got IKF and Billy McKinney in center field. And we all thought Aaron Hicks was the problem. Like, it's just a flawed team. Anthony Rizzo has been terrible for 2 months and nobody's talking about it, right? Jose Trevino, the most reliable catcher we've had since maybe Posada just went down for the year. So now don't even have solid catchers, right? Oh, I thought it was Gary Sanchez that was a problem. Nope. Apparently it's just the entire system. So, am I torn? Yes, I'm still a Yankees fan. Do I want to see them buy? Yeah, there's one guy I would like to see them go get, and that's Shohei Ohtani, and they have the system to do it. In my heart of hearts, though, do I want them to go do that? No, it's putting a Band-Aid on a femoral artery gash. Like, it's not going to do anything. Do you make the playoffs with that move? Probably. Do you lose to 3 other teams in the American League? Yeah, you do. And then what do? Oh, we complain. Oh, Aaron Boone needs to be. No, Aaron Boone's fine. The fact that he's had winning teams with these horribly designed rosters is amazing. Brian Cashman needs to go. And until Hal Steinbrenner sees that, I think they're just going to keep putting Band-Aids on top of Band-Aids on top of Band-Aids and bleed out.
I agree with you there as well. Let's go to the last team I got for you here. The Padres, 4 games under 500, 6 back out of the wild card. They were the most active team in last year's deadline. To me, they seem like they're going to start with a sell and see maybe if someone bites on Hader and Snell. They seem like those are the 2 that they may look to move. But again, can we really rule out the the Padres from not being buyers? Like, sure, the interest right now around them has been moving Hader and moving Blake Snell, who just walked like 38 guys in his last appearance, which wasn't necessarily the greatest thing in the world. But what do you think the Padres are doing? My prognosis looking at it is that they sell, but after what they did last year, I don't think they can make those big blockbuster moves last year just to be selling a year later. That just doesn't seem right.
So with AJ Preller, they're never not going to be in the discussion to buy. It's like Jerry Dipoto of the National League, right? The Mariners that guy made trades from a hospital bed one time. Okay, that's kind of AJ Preller with the Padres. I do think that if they are going to sell some of their pieces, the time to do it is now. Like, if you want to restock your system and make up for the lopsided move that was getting Juan Soto, I think you trade him now because he's not a free agent until after 2024. So you've got 2 pennants to go get him. And you can't tell me that nobody in baseball needs a lefty bat with power and on base and whatnot. So I think ultimately they're going to get enough calls that they wind up selling and be like, look, this isn't our window. We're going to fall behind the Dodgers. We're behind the Giants right now. We're behind the D-backs. We don't have enough pieces to go beat them. So let's restock the system and sell.
Yeah, it just, boy, what a
Also, they
fall.
can't re-sign. They don't have the money to re-sign Soto, because if you re-sign Soto, you can't sign anybody else between Manny's extension, the Bogart's 11-year deal. They signed Yu Darvish until he's 43 years old. Joe Musgrove is signed for another 4 years, right? They just gave $46 million to who was it? Robert Suarez.
Mm-hmm.
You're still paying people who aren't playing for you either. So I don't know where you're going.
Yep, I agree with you there as well. And of course, the MLB trade deadline's right around the corner. We'll have you covered here at fantasyalarm.com with all of the moves and the fantasy relevant moves, what it means for your teams and major league teams. We'll have that up on the site at fantasyalarm.com. So, Matt, we got to talk about a couple injuries here. Not all that many very big notable ones, which is always very good, but probably the most prominent one. Corey Seager heads to the IL with a thumb issue. I believe they're just calling it a jammed thumb. So, he may not be on it much past the minimum required stay, but when you look at the state of the Rangers, it seems like they have a pretty logical plan in place, and that Ezekiel Duran just becomes their shortstop, and that's pretty much all that's going to happen. So his at-bats are fine. Not that they were in really much jeopardy beforehand, but fantasy managers may have to prepare without Seager for about a week and a half or so. I can't see it going past too long if it's just a jam or a very minor sprain.
Yeah, I would agree. It does stink. This is his second time on the IL this year. Good news is it's going to be a shorter stint than it was last time. And if you own Ezekiel Duran, congrats, because you get even more at bats, I guess, although he was already full-time anyway. And if he was short on shortstop eligibility in your league, now he's going to get a little bit better of a shot. I don't think anything's going to slow down this Rangers offense right now. So,
yeah, think about it. Even if he's out, I know Adolis Garcia may be a little bit banged up too, but they still have him. They got Josh Jung. They got Duran. Doesn't matter who they put behind the dish. They're both going to hit. Doesn't even matter.
Yeah,
Marcus Semien.
they'll be 5 starters on the American League All-Star team.
I know.
So now you take one of them out, you still have 4 starters on the All-Star team. And Duran, I think, should have probably been a reserve based on how good he was.
Yep. I agree there as well. Then when you look in Houston, looks like some reinforcements are coming. Looks like returns for Yordan Alvarez and Jose Altuve are on the horizon. And then Michael Brantley, maybe seeing him a little bit put a high average bat, probably knowing them near the top of the lineup because
he was going to be their number 2 hitter, right?
If they move Kyle Tucker out of the top 3 or 4 of this lineup, which I know they're going to once Michael Brantley returns, but good grief, how can you do it?
Didn't we have this discussion during spring training that Dusty Baker said that when Michael Brantley's back, he's his number 2 hole hitter no matter what?
Yeah, because he's ageist.
Yeah, well, that's what you get from a 73-year-old manager. 74. I don't know. He invented the high five. It's pretty awesome. I'm not making that up, by the way. He's legitimately credited with inventing the high five. Do
you think
if he hit number 2, great for fantasy value in front of that 3, 4, 5, 6 in that order? But if Altuve's back, where are you hitting Altuve in that order? You're not hitting him 2?
Or hit him lead off.
Or lead off, and then you get Brantley 2, and then what? Tucker 3?
Well,
Yordan 4 when he's back?
I'd almost think, knowing them, and because it's just not the right thing to do, they put Jordan 3, Bregman stays 4, and they would put Kyle Tucker at 5, which would make absolutely no sense. But I get it, I guess. Or they say, screw it, put Brantley where he belongs, put him at like 5th or 6th, and you go Altuve, Tucker, Jordan, Bregman.
Yeah. Although if you're gonna go that far, why not put Brantley at 9 and just get a second leadoff hitter?
That's true. But now with these guys coming back, do you think that's going to strengthen Houston's case for buying it all? Because I know right now we've seen the X's about, that they're rumored to really like Dylan Cease and somehow Luis Robert Jr. I don't know how that's going to happen.
I've seen rumors of Cody Bellinger too, but if Brantley's back, do they need outfield help?
Well,
maybe
the other thing is
Chas McCormick.
Yeah, I mean McCormick. I mean, this hot streak's going to end for him. Like, this is just not.
I mean, right, but he's at least a pretty solid defender.
Oh, yeah, and he's a fine bench bat too. I mean, I'm okay with him there.
But the question is, who are they giving up? Because Houston doesn't exactly have the deepest farm system either. Now, maybe it's the Astros, and they can convince people that, hey, we drafted and signed these guys, and now look, they make up all of our core of our team, so you can trust that they'll be good. But like, I don't know. Maybe the Cubs don't need very much for Bellinger because he's on a 1-year deal. I don't remember if Cease is a free agent at the end of the year. I feel like he has another year. I know Giolito's a free agent at the end of the year. So maybe those guys are cheaper options.
Yeah.
But I could see the Astros still buying because, look, they're in a dead heat with the Rangers in the AL West. If the Mariners add, they have the offense and pitching to turn it around relatively quickly. You don't want any parts of the 5-team race for 3 wildcard spots in the AL East, right? So I could see him adding.
Yep, I do as well. And I just looked. Dylan Cease is a free agent after the 2025.
Oh, so he's like Soto at this point. He can be a part of 3 pennant. If I was the White Sox, I would look at dealing Dylan Cease. You're not going to get the return Soto got, obviously, but you're dealing a high-value frontline starter with 2.5 seasons left, and you have no prospects in your system. I'd probably deal him.
Yep, I think you have to as well. And then the last one here, nothing really major note right now, but Chris Bryant just getting battered and bruised, hit by pitch in the forearm, missed a game or two, comes back, plays a game or two, hit on the finger, X-rays were negative, so maybe a day-to-day thing with Chris Bryant, nothing to be overly concerned about for me right now. But
that signing is looking more and more questionable by the.
He's one of the most annoying people to roster in fantasy.
Which signing is worse, Rendon's or Bryant's?
Oof.
Also, by the way, you have to factor in that Bryant followed them paying $50 million to not have an already signed Nolan Arenado still on their roster.
Yeah, the Rendon one's really bad.
I know, but coming off the 2019 World Series, like, he just started falling apart. Like, Bryant was already injured and was already busted before they signed him, and then they gave him, 8 years and 187 million?
Seven for a little over 180.
7 for 180? Yeah.
And the power's just nowhere.
As an AAV deal, obviously Rendon's is worse. But on a coming into it basis, I would say Bryant's is worse because you already knew what he was. You already knew he was sapped. You had already dumped $50 million and had less left on Arenado's deal when you traded him than what you just gave Bryant. And you outbid nobody for him. Like, at least the Angels had to outbid the deal the Nats gave Rendon and others had given Rendon. But nobody was bidding that much for Bryant's services.
Since going to Colorado in 2022, I'm looking at it here. He's hit 13 home runs in 107 games, and only 5 of them have come at home. 5 home runs and 224 at-bats in Coors Field as a member of the Rockies.
That's insane.
Good job, Chris.
I mean, either one of them is a bad contract. You're like splitting hairs here, right? Because Rendon's played a grand total of 146 games in 4 years with the Angels.
Yep.
Granted, 2020 was a 60-game season. I get it. But You now have 2021, 2022, and half of 2023. And he still hasn't racked up more than a full season of games. So,
not good.
No.
Not good. And Matt, let's go ahead and do it. Let's do our flavor of the week. I'll go first and make it quick because we got to get to everybody's favorite game show here. But for flavor of the week, I'm saying fantasy baseball teams and fruit medleys. You know, when you go to the store, you get that little package of fruit and it's got like the 5 or 6 different fruits in there. There's like the honeydew, there's the watermelon, which always goes bad in a couple of days and those things, which is frustrating. You'll get a couple grapes. You'll get a little bit of cantaloupe, and maybe if you're lucky and you get a nice one, you'll get some pineapple. But all of those things play an intricate part in this puzzle that is the fruit medley. And it's the same thing like our fantasy baseball teams. You have your studs, aka your pineapple, and then you get the other ones. You got some fringe guys like the cantaloupe or the honeydew that are just there. They serve a purpose, but they may not be there all that long. You know what I mean? And guys like Chas McCormick, we already talked about him. But while he's hot, you ride the hot bat, you leave him in there. And then once the fruit is spoiled a little bit, if you don't get around to it, McCormick goes on a slide, you drop him and you move on. So just like fruit medleys, while each has their own intricate part and some are better than others, it all contributes to that overall success of your fantasy team. So Matt, what is your flavor of the week?
Excellent point. My flavor of the week is beef ribs versus pork ribs. If you'd been following my Twitter yesterday, you would have seen that I was grilling up some ribs during the NASCAR race. My brother-in-law and I, grilled them up. They were delicious. They were beef ribs. Fantastic. Right. A couple of weeks ago, I made some pork ribs for a grill versus grill. Here's my thing. Are beef ribs really twice as good as pork ribs? Because they cost twice as much. So in fantasy, be wary of the guys that cost you twice as much and don't have that big of a gap in stats, right? Like, sure, the upside, everybody loves upside. And if the upside is there, great. But compare floors. Are the floors that much different? If they're not, then why are you paying twice the price for a guy that's essentially the same dude you can get for half the cost, right? Not saying the beef ribs were bad, just saying. If you give me the choice, I'll keep the money and get the pork ribs, and beef ribs are delicious, so are pork ribs. Not worth twice the cost.
I will take either. I agree. I don't know if they're twice as good. So I will agree with you there. And Matt, to wrap it up, name that player. So this will be, I'm only got one for you today. We're going to save the other one for next week, just in the interest of time, but his name has popped up a little bit, so we got to do it. So NL Central starting pitcher. I represented my team in the All-Star game, but I have been anything but that since the break. I have an 11.45 earned run average over my last 2 starts. And if we go back to since when the calendar flipped to June, I have an ERA north of 5, and my K per 9 is down to 7.43. While it's been a very good year for me overall by my standards, my recent numbers have some of that shine wearing off, and lefties are starting to get to me again, posting a 548 slugging percentage against me since the calendar has flipped to June. What NL Central starting pitcher is this, and do you have any concerns with this particular right-hander moving forward?
So I'm pretty sure you're talking about Mitch Keller of your beloved Pirates.
Sure am.
Who, for the first 2 months of the season, looked like the ace everybody thought he was when he was a prospect for the Pirates, and now everything with the Pirates has not worked out since then. Right? They were darlings of the NL Central with the best record in the NL at one point, leading the division, and then now everything has floated away. I don't know what we're doing with Mitch Keller going forward. I think it's a start-by-start thing. I think you have to bench him until he turns it around, though, to be honest.
And I would look at the matchups. If the other team's going to run out a bunch of lefties, proceed with caution. That was the issue in years past, and that is rearing its ugly head again. Like I said, 548 slug by lefties against him since June 1. But, Matt, that'll do it for the first edition here of the Fantasy Alarm Fantasy Baseball Podcast this week. Head over to fantasyalarm.com for all of your fantasy needs, baseball, NASCAR, basketball. We got football, of course. Make sure you get your hands on our draft guide. Follow us on Twitter or X. I don't know, whatever it's going to be by the time I blink next or take my next breath, because it seems like it's changing all the time. At Colby R. Conway. Matt Selz is at the Selz Man. Give us a follow there. Once again, check out everything at fantasyalarm.com, and we'll see you later this week with the next edition of the Fantasy Alarm Fantasy Baseball Podcast.